Hey guys, so we have brand new polls from every single competitive election this year. Basically all of the races in gray that you see here, as well as here, we have new polls for both the Senate and governor elections. We are now just 16 days away from the midterm elections on the 8th of November, and these polls are telling a story that we really have not seen before. North Carolina, Bud +5, while in Arizona, Mark Kelly still does have a very good chance of winning his re-election. Georgia is still neck and neck for both candidates, but in Pennsylvania, Mehmet Oz leads in the first ever poll for this election. We're going to take a close look at Pennsylvania as that Senate race is really starting to trend to the right, but John Fetterman is still definitely in the race and still does have a good chance at flipping the seat. We also have more polls from Arizona and Pennsylvania, as well as a new Ohio poll still signaling that the race is going to be close between J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan. We have 4 new Nevada polls. 2 of them have Laxalt in the lead, while 2 of them show Catherine Cortez Masto as the favorite, and then another poll from Iowa, which has Chuck Grassley ahead by just a measly 3 points against Michael Franken. On the governor level, we have a whole ton of new polls as well here, showing Josh Shapiro leading over Doug Mastriano still. We have him up by 12 points in another poll, but in Arizona, Kari Lake is seemingly defeating Katie Hobbs in most of the polls. In New York, Lee Zeldin actually leads over Kathy Hochul for the very first time. So we have a whole ton of interesting polls here for today's batch, and today we'll be taking a look at what those numbers mean for the Senate and governor elections that will occur in just a few weeks. And so we're going to start off with the race in Arizona. We have 2 elections, one for Senate and one for governor. The governor election, we have a dead heat between Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake, while Mark Kelly is ahead by 3 points in the latest poll against Blake Masters for his Senate seat. And so we do have a new WIC poll here from all 4 major races that we have polls from today. And WIC is a relatively new pollster. That's why they only have a preliminary rating, and their rating is AB, which is the best rating that they can have without having a full rating. That's what they get when they do more polls. And so I think that they are a pretty good pollster. They're going to be wrong in Pennsylvania, but in these upper 3 races, I think their polls are going to end up being pretty accurate. And so when asked who people voted for in the 2020 presidential election, we had an even tie between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and of course Joe Biden only won Arizona by 0.3%, so this is a pretty good sample. And so when looking at the governor race, Kari Lake is down by 0.1% against Katie Hobbs, and then when asked who the 3.3% of undecided voters would vote for if they had to choose somebody, they did choose Katie Hobbs 51% of the time, but of course this is a very small sample of just 35 people. And then in the Senate election, Blake Masters is down against Mark Kelly by 3.5%, and when these 2.6% of undecided voters were asked, they chose Blake Masters actually 53% of the time, Mark Kelly only 47.5% of the time if these undecided voters had to choose somebody. And so when looking at the Senate poll, I think that Mark Kelly is still in a good position, but his lead is the smallest it's ever been, even though he is yet to lose in a single one of these polls. Blake Masters has not led in any Senate poll ever released this year, but the numbers are getting closer. And then for the governor election, Katie Hobbs is only down by 1.1%, so this is a winnable race for Democrats, but it's still closer than it's really ever been. Katie Hobbs had a very big lead at one point, but now Kari Lake seems to be ahead, but just by a very small amount. And so when looking at both of these races, I have Arizona currently as being lean and Democratic. I still do think Mark Kelly is going to win. He still does have a clear advantage, while in the governor race, I think it's almost a pure toss-up, but if I were to have to give a rating, I would give it a tilt Republican rating. I think that Kari Lake does have a very incremental edge over Katie Hobbs right now, as she has been doing pretty well in the latest polls. And not just that, but the Arizona race went to Doug Ducey by 14 points in 2018. I think it will be difficult to flip a governorship, especially when you have an unpopular Democratic president in the White House. And next up in North Carolina, Ted Budd leads by 5 points against Cheri Beasley. At this point, I think the race is lost for Democrats. I think Ted Budd will be elected to the Senate to succeed Richard Burr. A 2-point lead is significant. Democrats are almost always overestimated in the Tar Heel state when polls are conducted. They definitely did underperform in 2020 in both the presidential and Senate races. They were expected to win both, but lost both of those elections. The last time Democrats won a Senate or presidential election in North Carolina was back in 2008 when Barack Obama, of course, defeated John McCain by just 0.3%. And then for the Senate election, Elizabeth Dole lost to Kay Hagan by 8.5%. But this was a very good year for Democrats. They won 59 seats in the Senate, and of course, Barack Obama winning 365 electoral votes. We're not seeing this sort of environment in 2022. Democrats are not going to flip North Carolina if they couldn't even do it in 2020. In 2020, they had a very good chance with Cal Cunningham defeating Tom Tillis, but Tillis still came out on top by 1.7%. If they couldn't do it then, 2022 is not going to be their year. Ted Budd is going to succeed Richard Burr, and I think that he has a very good chance at, in fact, winning by over 5%, simply because of the polling error that we've continued to see in the state. So right now, North Carolina, I have as a likely Republican state, but just barely. I don't think he's going to do more than 6%, but I think that slightly over 5% is probably going to be the margin for the Senate race in North Carolina, and of course in favor of Ted Budd, who has been serving in the House for almost a decade now. In Georgia, we still have a very close Senate election between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, but in the governor race, Brian Kemp is ahead by 9 points against Stacey Abrams, and he's on track to winning by a much larger margin than he did in 2018. Back then, Stacey Abrams only lost by 1.4%, but this time, Brian Kemp is the heavy favorite to win a second term. He is a popular incumbent, and that's the main reason why he is doing so well. I think if Stacey Abrams won last time, she would have a good chance at winning this race against Brian Kemp if Kemp ran for a second time. But at this point, the governor for Georgia is going to be a Republican after 2023. And then for the Senate race, though, we are seeing a much closer election. Raphael Warnock maintains a 3-point lead, and with polling being very accurate in Georgia, this 3-point lead is a pretty big deal. However, both of these candidates will have to get to at least 50% if they want to win, which means that Raphael Warnock right now is probably not going to win outright, and he probably will have to win in a runoff election, and the circumstances of that runoff are going to matter a lot. If Democrats can't get to 49 seats without Georgia, that means Georgia will be their 50th seat, and that will motivate Democrats, just like they did in 2021 in the runoffs, to come out for Warnock. However, if Republicans win the Senate anyways and they get to 51 seats without the race in Georgia, then I think that it will not be good for Democrats. I think that if the race in Georgia is going to be the deciding election, Democrats will win, but if not, Republicans are probably going to flip this seat and Warnock will be ousted out of office. And so when looking at all the most recent polls, Raphael Warnock is in a pretty good position, especially after the new revelations that came out about Herschel Walker and him having paid for an abortion and then also requesting one a second time, but the girlfriend that he was with at the time said no and actually bared one of his children. And so for the governor election, it's going to go to Republicans, but the Senate election is still a toss-up with Democrats being favored. And so in this latest Whig poll, Donald Trump, Joe Biden basically even, and this is very close to what the final 2020 presidential election results were, so we have a good sample here as well. And then for the governor race, of course, Brian Kemp leads by 9%, and when undecided voters were asked who they would vote for, so this is just 35 people, they chose Stacey Abrams 71% of the time. She's definitely doing better with voters that are not sure who they're going to vote for in the end. And then in the Senate election, Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock are in a dead heat, and when asked who they would vote for if they had to choose somebody, these are the 44 undecided voters. Raphael Warnock is ahead with 61% of these undecideds supporting him. So in the end, I think Warnock has a very slight advantage, but getting to 50% outright in the first election is going to be very, very difficult. And I think that if he does win, it will be in a runoff. And the same thing for Herschel Walker. If Walker wins, it's not going to be in the election on the 8th of November. It's going to be a runoff that will occur in December. And then for the governor election in Georgia, of course, it's going to be likely Republican. And I think the Democrats should give up on trying, even though Stacey Abrams is their best possible candidate as a popular incumbent. Brian Kemp is very, very difficult to defeat. In the Keystone State of Pennsylvania, for the very first time, Dr. Oz leads in a poll against John Fetterman. Here he's up by 5%. I think this margin is definitely overinflated for Republicans, but still it's significant that Mehmet Oz even leads in a single poll, and this does reflect the overall trend that Democrats are slipping in terms of their control over the Keystone State this year. John Fetterman's 2.2% margin is the smallest it has ever been. At the very beginning of this month, he was still up by 6% against Oz, and of course, this is the only only poll ever to show Mehmet Oz leading against the Democratic Lieutenant Governor. But overall, I do still think John Fetterman has a very good chance at winning. You cannot count him out. He's still the Lieutenant Governor and a very popular candidate, especially among suburban voters. While in the governor race, Josh Shapiro does still lead by 2 points in this poll that does favor Republicans. And when looking at the overall polling average, Josh Shapiro is up by 8.7% against Doug Mastriano. Mastriano is the worst Republican gubernatorial candidate. He's just way too far to the right for a state as to the center as Pennsylvania. And even if poll numbers slip for Shapiro, he's still going to win. He's just up by so much, and that's why Pennsylvania continues to be a likely Democratic state according to my ratings. And so looking closer at this Whig poll, we'll see that Trump and Biden are pretty close, and this poll actually almost matches the 2020 presidential election results, but I still do think that the poll for Senate and governor are favoring Republicans just a little bit too much. And so when looking at the governor poll, Shapiro leads by 2 points, and the undecided voters actually favor Doug Mastriano by just a little bit. Of course, this is still a sample size of 34, so it's really not significant at all, but in the end, it does show that Josh Shapiro continues to be the favorite. And then in the Senate race, Mehmet Oz is actually ahead by 5 points, like I said before, 4.5% to be more exact. But when looking at the undecided voters, they do favor Mehmet Oz 59% of the time. I think the Senate race will be very interesting to watch over the next couple of weeks, as it is almost a pure toss-up at this point. But if I were to have to give it a rating, I would still have Pennsylvania as a tilt Democratic state. I think that both Pennsylvania and Georgia, Democrats have a good chance at winning just because of the fact that they're running much better candidates than the GOP. But the Republican Party can still win, as this still will be their year after Joe Biden was elected in 2020 with both control of the Senate and the House. Republicans are bound to do better this year. They're going to make gains in the House at least. The Senate is possible, but if they do make even a single gain, Democrats are going to lose control, and I do think they have a good chance at expanding in the number of governorships that they do control, as Oregon is becoming more and more competitive, and that may be the race that will give Republicans their 28th governorship, or maybe even their 29th. But when looking at the Senate elections, I think it will still be very, very close. Both parties still have a good chance, but the race in Pennsylvania is definitely closer than has ever been. The 530 forecast, in fact, has Pennsylvania as a toss-up race for the first time in months. John Fetterman now only with a 58% chance at winning. Looking at the graph, I mean, it went up significantly in mid-September. That was the month the Democrats looked like they were doing the best in, but over the last few weeks, their numbers have slipped, and now John Fetterman is only ahead by a very small amount, and he's expected to win by just 1.2% according to this forecast. But I think the race will go down to the wire, as Mehmet Oz is in the best position he's been in over the last 2 years. And now moving down our list of polls over the last 2 days, we have some more numbers from Arizona and Pennsylvania, but in Washington, Patty Murray is ahead in all 3 of the latest polls. She is going to win by a likely margin. I think that a 5-point margin will be easily attainable for the 4-time incumbent. Washington continues to be a likely Democratic state. However, in Ohio, we do have one of the most interesting races of the year. This, of course, is between J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan. Vance is now ahead by 0.9% in the polls, his largest margin basically since he lost the lead back in late June. Tim Ryan is a very strong Democratic nominee, and I think this race will not even be decided by a likely margin. I do think Ohio is going to be lean Republican, even though North Carolina is likely. I think that North Carolina will vote to the right of Ohio this year, and that's just because J.D. Vance is running a terrible campaign when compared to the campaign that Tim Ryan is running. Tim Ryan did win the debate on most accounts. However, it's not really going to have that large of an impact on the eventual election. The Senate debates aren't as impactful as the presidential debates, as just simply not watched by that many people. And so Tim Ryan has only led in 1 out of the last 6 polls, but these last 6 polls barely have J.D. Vance leading. Even the Trafalgar Group only has J.D. Vance winning by a lean margin. They can't even get him to a likely margin of victory against Ryan. And so the Ohio race, I think, will be very, very close, much closer than it should be. Honestly, the Republicans should be winning by at least 10 points in a state that Trump won by 8 points in the last 2 presidential elections. But with Tim Ryan holding out strong, J.D. Vance is struggling to win his first term, but at this point he is still the favorite, and I think that there's a very good chance that he will end up being the one to succeed Rob Portman. Time is running out for Tim Ryan, as if you look at a couple of months ago, he had a good chance at flipping the seat because he still did have a lot of months left to campaign, but now with just 16 days to go until the election, we're starting to see time slip for Tim Ryan. He really doesn't have as much time as he did before to make an impact on this race by doing whatever he can to increase his chances, but now 538 gives Tim Ryan just a 25% chance at winning, as Ohio is now a likely Republican state once again. The odds dipped down for him pretty significantly, but they have started to come back up just a little bit. We have 4 new polls from Nevada, 2 of them showing Adam Laxalt as the favorite, but 2 of them that have Catherine Cortez Masto leading, and the Nevada election is going to be one of the closest ones. If Democrats win Nevada, they're going to win the Senate, but if Republicans win it, they have a good chance at winning back the majority, but not at all guaranteed. And so when looking at the Senate race, Adam Laxalt is ahead by 0.2% against the incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto, but this race is going to go down to the wire, as we see polling showing both candidates ahead, even though Laxalt has a very slight advantage. And so during the summer, Masto was in a much stronger position. She really looked like she was going to win the race, but as we entered the fall and now late October, Adam Laxalt seems to be the candidate with a higher chance of winning. In fact, 538 is actually favoring Adam Laxalt now for the very first time in a very long time. Laxalt has a 54% chance at winning, 46 for Masto. The last time that Laxalt was ahead, he had a 51% chance at winning, and that was all the way back on the 13th of July. Now he's up at 54, the highest chances he's ever had for this election. And I do definitely agree with this. I think that even though Democrats are still in the race, Republicans are favored, and in the end, there's probably going to win a seat. It will be very difficult to see Republicans not flipping a single seat in a year like 2022 with a map as winnable as this one. This map should be a very winnable map for Republicans. They honestly should be winning at least 52 to 53 seats, but because of the nominees that they chose, Democrats are very much in the race for the Senate majority. And when looking at the governor election in Nevada, we have a close election between Joe Lombardo and Steve Sisolak. Sisolak is the incumbent Democratic governor elected in 2018, but he's been behind in basically every single one of the most recent polls. I don't think he's going to win his re-election, but still, it's going to be a close race. And for both elections in Nevada, I have them as tilt Republican. I think even though Democrats have a chance, Republicans are still the favorites. However, the good thing for them is that in 2018, what the good thing for Democrats is in 2018, Republicans did underperform all polling expectations in both the Senate and governor elections, as Jackie Rosen defeated Dean Heller, and of course Steve Sisolak defeated Adam Laxalt. But this year, the leads for Republicans, I think, are going to hold. Democrats in 2018 had much more incentive to come out and vote against Donald Trump and the ruling Republican Party, but this year with Democrats in office, I think Republicans are going to have much more enthusiasm on their side, and that means that they're probably not going to underperform polling as much as they did last time, which means that these numbers, I think, are strong enough for them to win both races, but still only tilt ratings, as these elections are still going to be one of the closest ones that we have. And then looking at the remaining governor polls, I mean, really none of them are going to be too interesting to look at, but we do have one big poll from New York that shows Lee Zeldin leading against Kathy Hochul. Hochul's margin of victory is now just 6.8% according to the polling average. I mean, this is honestly an abysmal margin for the Democratic incumbent, even though she only took office last year. She became governor after Andrew Cuomo was forced to resign, and after years of mismanagement at the top of the Democratic Party in the Empire State, this really is what they deserve. The Democratic Party should not win New York by a solid margin. I mean, the way that they've managed the state over the last couple of years has been pretty horrendous, especially with their scandals. I mean, Andrew Cuomo and then the first lieutenant governor that Kathy Hochul had was also forced to resign as a result of a bribery scandal, and now she's on her second lieutenant governor, which means that since Andrew Cuomo was re-elected in 2018, we've had 3 lieutenant governors of New York. Lee Zeldin is now within a striking range of Hochul, and I think that this race is going to be close, but in the end, Hochul is still the heavy favorite, even though we now have a single poll showing Lee Zeldin in the lead. He probably is not going to win. New York is just too blue of a state. Even in a year like 2022, it's just not going to flip. It's a big state, and flipping big states is very, very difficult. So in the governor election, I have New York as being likely Democratic, but I may move it down as to being a lean state in the coming weeks if things continue to get closer, but I really don't see myself putting New York in a tilt category or as a race that Republicans are more likely than not to win. And the final poll we're going to go over today is the poll from Iowa that has Michael Franken only behind by 3 points against Chuck Grassley, according to a poll conducted by his campaign. And so this poll shows Michael Franken only behind by a lean margin. Chuck Grassley is a 7-time incumbent, so the fact that this race is close, I think, is very interesting. But the main reason why Grassley is doing so poorly is because of his advanced age. As he's gotten older, his margins have been decreasing more and more. 2016 was his worst margin margin in decades, and now in 2022, it's probably not even going to be a solid red state for him, as even the most Republican pollsters don't have Chuck Grassley winning by a solid margin. That's why Iowa has been a likely Republican state on my maps for quite a while. I just don't think he's going to win by 15%, but he is still the heavy favorite. I mean, just look at the 530 forecast. He is still at a 95%, 96% chance at winning against Franken. Franken is a good Democratic candidate. I think if he ran against Joni Ernst in 2020, he would have made that race closer than Teresa Greenfield did, but still, against Chuck Grassley, that's just the situation that he's in. He's not going to win, and Iowa is going to be a red state once again. And so that will be it for this video. We have a very, very competitive Senate map. If I'm going to fill in Wisconsin, it's going to be likely Republican. But when looking at the 3 races in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Nevada, they really could swing the map in any direction. Both parties have a good chance at winning. And at this point, I wouldn't even say Democrats are favored, but that does not mean that Republicans are favored either. That means that both parties are pretty much in a dead heat, as 538 has said. 55 for Democrats, 45 for Republicans in terms of their chances at winning. If you look at the odds for Democrats, they have gone down pretty significantly in just the last few weeks. In October, at one point in time, they had a 71% chance at winning, but when this forecast was first released, they were only at 40. So when compared to a long time ago, Democrats are in a much better position. However, when compared to just a few months ago, they are not doing as well as they were before, but still, the Senate race is going to be very, very close as both parties attempt to win that majority. I think that both parties have a good chance, and so really, we're just going to have to wait for what happens in the next couple of weeks, and then, of course, what happens on election night on the 8th of November. So definitely, we have many interesting races to look forward to, and so like this video down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below which party you think will win the Senate majority, and how do you feel about my commentary today? I don't think it's that great, but I really didn't have that much time to make this video, so I'm just going to go with this clip anyways. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next video.